Hello, this is how to use ILSpy, the .NET decompiler and .NET Framework decompiler application. On Google, I search for ILSpy, takes me to the GitHub page. In here, we're going to download one of the releases. The application uses .NET version 10, and I usually just unarchive the portable version. So ILSpy self-contained x64.zip. We're on Windows 11 Pro AMD 64. The largest file in here. The download has finished. ILSpy self-contained. It's a zip file. I'm going to extract it. You can use either the built-in zip extractor inside Windows 11, or I have installed the application 7-zip. Okay, so the first directory in here. Let's see if the application actually runs, if it doesn't require me to install additional dependencies. You can sort by extension, and it's just two executable files. And the one that we're interested in is the one that has an icon called ILSpy.exe. I have started the application. This is how it looks like. Let's have it open a number of .NET DLLs, .NET X's, or .NET Framework DLLs and see how that works. On the left tool window where it says assemblies, I'm going to remove everything, Ctrl-A, delete. Let's have the executable in there, so ILSpy.exe, I'm going to drag and drop it. Okay, it says that it's a Windows PE file, and it's not a .NET Framework assembly or a .NET assembly. Let's see if that's the case. So starts with MZ, it's portable executable. So this is probably a .NET style executable, which actually runs without having .NET installed on the system or .NET Framework installed on the system. So it's not a managed DLL, it's just a plain Windows AMD 64 executable. And then that's going to delegate the work to the actual .NET installation that is present in this directory. Let's see if the actual entry point, the start of the .NET managed part, is inside the DLL with a similar name, ILSpy.dll. I can guess a bit where the actual entry point of the executable is. So the managed part, not the actual entry point of the ILSpy.exe file, which is not written in C#, it's written probably in C++. So probably it's in the top level namespace, which is iC#code.ilspy. I can see it's using XAML and Avalon. So it's probably in this namespace. I can immediately see app. I can immediately see an about dialog, which is probably this part. And I'm searching for a program class. There's no such thing, but there is a main window class. So we can go right click on the class and analyze, Control R. A new tool window is opened, which tells us where this class is instantiated. Yeah, let's actually use the most powerful feature that I have used in this application in ILSpy, which is after I open a DLL or an exe that contains intermediate language, I can convert from that DLL to a full csproj C# source code project. So right click on the DLL in assembly tool window, and you go save code. Let's save it in the today's directory. Okay, it's pretty fast, just 5 seconds. SDK style project was generated. And we can go to a project that uses the older style of csproj files as used by previous versions of Microsoft Visual Studio in options, decompiler, project, export. Let's see what we have here. So there's a csproj file, and we have selected the export to be in C#, and we're using the newest possible version of Visual Studio and C# programming language. So for instance, if you're on Visual Studio 2019, you can select C# version 8 or C# version 9 and Visual Studio 2019 or 2019.8. Let's see how things work. I have Visual Studio 2026 community installed. Let's see if I have the C# workload and toolchain available. So Visual Studio 2026, let's go into the installer. And I'm actually going to update Visual Studio community. I'll be back. So Visual Studio Community 2026 finished updating. Let's modify its configuration and make sure that we have the desktop C# support enabled. So that's .NET desktop development. This should be it. I'm going to now apply the changes. Okay, so we have modified Visual Studio. Now it should support C# and .NET and .NET Framework. So let's open the csproj by just double-clicking on it. Let's see what's happening. Says that I want to select. We can select either Visual Studio or Visual Studio Selector. Let's go just once. Let's close some of the not really needed parts. Okay, so we can see XAML files for the main window, for the for some other dialogues, the about page, for instance. And then we can just start digging. Let's get to the about page. Let's see who's using it. So yes, in the spirit of the .NET, not .NET Framework, a csproj, a C# project that's of type Windows application, will get actually compiled to a DLL. I have tried to make this C# project compile correctly, but there's hundreds and hundreds of compilation errors. The first one was that it's using XAML and it's not marked as operating system Windows. I did that. Then it complained that there's no reference to system.windows forms, so it's using both system.windows, so XAML, but also system.windows.forms. So I added the reference to system.windows.forms, and then some pinvoke methods were using a newer way of importing. And then once I fix those, I get already defined members. This is a huge csproj file, tens of thousands of lines of C# code, and something's just not perfect in the way ILSpy decompiles the DLL to csproj. But in broad lines, 99% of the things work correctly. The C# source code is very easy to read. It's split correctly in very small classes, very small files. There's interfaces, and then all of the identifiers have really great names. I don't see all of the not public fields have just the name A or AA or other techniques that make the source code identifiers not easy to read. So both identifiers are great, human readable, but also the body of methods looks really, really great. Hopefully, if you're using ILSpy on a way smaller DLL, you're going to get source code that you actually then can compile back using Visual Studio. Don't save anything. Let's try to open using ILSpy. Applications that use older versions of the .NET or .NET Framework. Let's see such an application. So we have paint.net that is using .NET Framework 3.5. Let's see how that works. Paint.net Core. Let's switch, for instance, to a older version of Visual Studio. Let's go with C# 7.3 with the newest version of Visual Studio 2017. And now we can extract, convert the DLL file to a csproj file and project. So save code. Let's create a new directory. Let's look at the source code. So Paint.NET is a painting application, and it's also very complex. You can see this by the huge amount of namespaces and classes. Let's try to open the csproj file. Let's look a bit around. Properties. It's a class library, .NET Framework 3.5. We're probably not going to be able to build these, both because we don't have the build toolchain for Visual for .NET Framework 3.5, this thing. And also the rest of Paint.NET DLLs will not be found easy. So all of the dependencies, such as this one. Okay, let's look also at what we think is the entry point, or some random code in here. So the decompiled source code again looks easy to read. It's not obfuscated at all. Yeah, it's missing the comments and documentation strings that so documentation for individual methods, identifiers, classes, etc. Because even if those exist in the original source code of Paint.NET, when the compiler works and generates the DLL, the comments will get removed, and the doc strings, the documentation for identifiers and methods, the ones that you write in your source code with 3 slashes at before the line where you define the identifier, those in the best case scenario get copied to a .xml file with the documentation for this DLL. Let's look at a newer version of this application, Paint.NET. So that was the newest version of Paint.NET in the version 3, so 3.5.11. And we have the newest version in version 4, so 4.3.12. ILSpy. Remove everything, so from assembly, select everything, Ctrl A, and then the delete key on your keyboard. And then let's find one of the most important DLLs in here. There's paint.net.exe. Let's see what this thing is. And it says that does not contain any managed data, so already smells like .NET Core or .NET. Paint.net.dll. Let's convert to a C# project, save code. Let's see what runtime it's actually using. How can we find that out? Runtime 4.0, so that would mean .NET Framework 4.7 probably. .NET Core, so it's .NET Core version 6, which is .NET 6. Okay, so let's use a newer C# version. Let's go with the newest for Visual Studio 2019 and convert to code, save code, new directory. Let's see if these two versions resemble in any way. I'm not sure why the C# namespaces are so different, in the sense that there's many more in the newer version. Yeah, maybe yeah, I don't have any explanation why. The size of the DLL is 13 megabytes, and the paint.net .base and core continue to exist. Okay, let's open with Visual Studio. And now it offers to install the correct toolchain for .NET probably 6. Let's look at the properties. It's a class library, not an executable, and it uses .NET 6. So the decompilation worked correctly. It only supports the C# or IL programming languages. ILSpy is a continuation of Lutz Röder's reflector, and that also supported other programming languages for the .NET Framework. There were at times support for Visual Basic different versions, for managed C++ or C++ CLI, and also for F#. So on those older versions of ILSpy or applications very similar to ILSpy, you could actually have a large Visual Basic source code, and you could help in translating the Visual Basic source code to C# by actually compiling the Visual Basic DLLs, getting the generated DLLs, and then putting those through ILSpy and decompiling them to C#. And back, if you had a C# source code base, maybe a csproj, you could compile it using Visual Studio and load the generated DLL in ILSpy or in Reflector, and then decompile that thing to Visual Basic. So that would allow you to change from one version of the C# programming language to another version of Visual Basic programming language. And you can actually select which version of C# programming language and which version of Visual Basic, in that case, programming language. That allowed you to switch from one programming language to another, but even so, using this combo box, we can switch between different versions of the C# programming language. And this allows interesting things. For instance, if you have a code base that doesn't use top-level expressions and you receive some source code that uses top levels, you can convert the source code that uses top levels, you can compile it and then get the generated DLL, open it in ILSpy, and then go to the version of C# programming language that you want, and that will undo all of those newer features that are being used in the C# source code that you wanted to include in your existing code base. This is how the Paint.NET application actually looks like. It's a advanced image editor. Let's try to do such a change from from C# 14.0, for instance, to the newest C# 7.3 for Visual Studio 2017. So the newest C# version for Visual Studio 2017. For that, on Google, I searched C# 14 demo source code. It took me to this Git repository where it says that there's source code and an SLN, which I downloaded. And I have opened on inside Visual Studio Community 2026 and it builds correctly. And now let's see the actual demos. Extension members. Okay, so this new feature in C# 14 named extension member is similar to an extension method. Extension methods do require a pair of parentheses, where in this case, in extension member, we can have no parentheses, property like syntax. So there's a class in here that contains the extension methods named datetime extensions. The syntax is as you would expect, this and then the type name. And all of these end with _em. Let's search for this. Let's see where they are used. Okay, so there's no parentheses. And then there's also no _em. I'm not sure where the transition is being made from this syntax to this syntax. Let's actually decompile this thing and see how it would look like implemented in a previous version of the C# programming language. So I'm going to rebuild. So this is the DLL. Let's see how we can open. Control V. And we're selecting an older version of C# programming language. Select the directory where to save. Right click, save code. And open the csproj. On the right-hand side, we have the original source code on the right half. On the left half, we have the newer source code in the version of C# that we actually wanted, which is 7.3. The original source code uses top-level statements, whereas the new source code does not. There's a class named program, as you would expect. The source code lines with instructions actually are pretty similar. var today, date time now. It doesn't know that the original source code was using var or the full value of the type name, so in this case date time. Again, it doesn't know that the original source code had comments. The right line looks identical all the way. And this is the block with underscore em and then parentheses. And then it says new way. And in here, it's using today dot Monday of current week, which seems to be a syntax, a sugar syntactics on top of this getter, get underscore Monday of current week. And then today as the first argument. So it's not using the syntax of the extension methods, which is today dot and then the extension method. So probably extension methods existed in C# 7.3. And then extension members did not exist in C# 7.3. So ILSpy needed to invent some C# code for the IL intermediate language that exists inside the DLL that also works on C# version 7.3. So it's this thing, get underscore, and then the start of the extension method name without underscore em. So there's only there's extension members. Okay. Okay, now I understand. So date time extensions are extension methods with underscore em, and then the other source code file, datetime extension members, it's using the C# keyword extension. And there's a getter or a property. And then this syntax for property getters with equals and greater than. Okay, so there's no magic conversion where underscore em is very significant. It's just a different syntax in a different source code file with the C# keyword extension. Okay, and there actually exists this getter for the property, which looks like a method, get underscore Monday of current week. And the object whose property you're calling is defined on line 10 in the extension keyword. So it's this date identifier that's then being used in the bodies of the getters everywhere. Also in here, and in here. Okay, so this was it. The application ILSpy is one that I use. It's open source. It supports the latest versions of Visual Studio and the C# programming language. I generally use it for two things: to take a DLL and decompile it to C# source code, and I select the version of the C# programming language that I want. I don't actually use .NET, just .NET Framework, which means that I need to select the version of C# that I use carefully. And then I'm also not using new SDK style format for generated project files, which means that I modify this setting. So let's see how that is done. View, main module, main menu in ILSpy, and then options, and then the compiler, and project export, and I uncheck this checkbox, use new SDK style format for generated project files. Okay. So I turn ADLL to C# source code, and I select the version of C# source code that I need. There's also additional features inside the graphical user interface application ILSpy. You can navigate the code, but then I can navigate the code way better, in my opinion, if I open the generated C# project in Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio. Let's see the program. You can analyze, you can see where this is being used. Let's look at the extension member for Monday, this guy. Okay, so it's used by the main in here on this line. But then I can also navigate source code in Visual Studio. Let's see how we do that. So let's find out who calls get_Monday. Okay, so this thing doesn't work. Let's see if it compiles. Extension marker is reserved for compiler usage. Yeah, ILSpy actually decompiles things as well as possible, but then there's all sorts of gotchas because it's touching the very low level of the C# programming language and the compiler and the garbage collector and various other technologies such as pinvoke. Very low level stuff. Yeah, but I can always search. Match case. F4 works correctly to navigate in the result list in a find tool window. So the ILSpy graphical user interface application has many features, but I don't actually need to use them because I already know how to do those things in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. So this is it, ILSpy, very useful application. It works It always worked, tens of years, has all of the features that I would expect, does a beautiful job into making most C# DLLs and .NET DLLs and .NET Framework DLLs be, between quotes, open source, in the sense that I can actually read the source code that's behind the DLL. Thank you.